Structurizing a Express.js project is very essential skill you need to know because it defines the scalability of the application. By default, Express does not provide any project structure. We just import the Express.js in our Node.js project, and then we create endpoints, and then we bind it to a port. And now, when we create multiple endpoints or multiple routes for the application, it can become messy in a single file. So it needs to be structured in a proper way that we can add infinite number of endpoints in our project. So as you can see in this file in app.js, we have only one file here, and here I am importing Express, MySQL, and creating MySQL connection. Then created a slash users API with get request, then slash products API with get post all the request. So it's look messy as it goes. To solve this problem, we have to structure our project in a well defined way so that anyone can understand it, scale it, and work on it. Since we are going to structurize our Express.js project, that means we are going to create a framework style architecture so that it can be scalable over time when we create multiple routes. So to do that, first we will create a src folder, and we will move our app.js inside the src folder. So that means all our code will be inside src folder. Now there are few directories here. I will explain one by one. Since this is a Express server and will connect the database to get the data and create, update, delete the data on MySQL database or maybe in Mongo database. That means the database should be stored in a config file, and we can load that database to do our all the operations on database. To do that, in the config directory, we will create a db.js that will hold our database connection. Here we are using MySQL2 package, so we will directly import the MySQL2 package here. And we have removed all the MySQL related code from the app.js. Here we are directly importing the .env config, where we will have .env at the top level so that we can access the environment variable throughout the project. Then we are creating Express server instance, and then we are using app.use express.json as like before. And then we are structurizing the project in a way that can be scalable and easily understandable. So when we are loading the default middleware express.json, that means we are passing the JSON request body. Then we also need some other custom middleware that needs to run before any request route. So to do that, I have created a middleware directory to store all the middleware. And then we have all the routes coming from module folder or module directory. And then after all the routes are injected, we are loading the request after middleware. Some middleware needs to run after all the routes are done. And at the end of the file, we will listen to the port. So I'll explain each of this, but the basic structure of app.js, which is our entry file, will look like this. Now, here you can see we are not directly injecting db.js here, which is located in config directory, the db.js, which has the MySQL package imported, MySQL connection created with the process env, and then we are connecting the database and module.export. Since this is a common JS project, that's why we need to export this as module, the DB as module after connect. Then later we will use this DB when needed. I'll come to that point later. So db.js which is inside the config is out from the app.js. And now here inside middleware, we have two files after request middleware, before request middleware. And before request middleware have one token middleware and one logger middleware. Those are exported as module from here. See, here we are using multiple constant variable as function. So it has to be passed as object. So when in db.js we have only one value, that's why we passing it like this equals to the db instance. And here in before request middleware, where we have token middleware and logger middleware, both are passed as the object. So here we are passing as object. And here is after request middleware. I will explain more details in later. In this video, we are going to focus on the structure only. So these are two middleware, and then we have all the modules. Now, how the module works. Consider we have two tables in our database, products and users. So there will be two module in our project. So if I expand the modules folder, there will be two folder called user and product, or you can say users and products. You can match it with the table name as well. So it's not necessary that it also can be given a singular name instead of the plural name. So product and user. Now, if I expand user directory, then here we can see there are two root files and one service file. I will explain each of them. So let's go back here. What it was doing here, here we can see load all user roots. So for loading all user roots, we are importing the user.root file from the module slash user as user roots, and then we are attaching it to the Express app using app.use slash API. So the endpoint for all these endpoint, it will be the initial for the endpoints like slash API. Then we have user roots. I'll come to the token middleware later. Now consider we have user roots. Now let's go to the user root. If I go to the user root here, what we are doing, we in each root file, will define all the roots. That means the API endpoint for the corresponding table or module. So one module will associate with one table in database where we will perform all the CRUD operation using the same endpoint but different request method. So here we are using post to create user, using get to get all user, and using get method again, but here id as request parameter in the URL, get user by id. And see, here we are separating all the DB logic from our root itself. So in user.root.js, we are importing the express, and then we are getting the express router. This is a router module for express which help us to attach the root and export it. And in app.js, we can import it as user root and then bind it to the slash API with app.use that will attach to the express app. So we are going to execute this file to start the application, and that will get the user roots from the user, which will have all the roots attached with this router, which is exported as user roots, and that is attaching with the express app here. Now before we are using a callback function here for any root, like req for request and res for response, and then we are performing all the review operation directly inside the root. But now it's separated to a separate file. So our all roots will stay here, but our all business logic will go to the service file, which is user service. So here we have all the user service where we are actually doing the CRUD operation on database table. So service file will have access to the database, which is coming from the config. The DB instance of the database is coming from the config file. So we can perform database operation on the service file. So on the service file, we are going to use our query for CRUD operation.
So this has all the function like this one for creating user where we are validating directly inside the service file. And if the validation is not correct, then we are returning the response before running any database query. To validate anything, we have to validate it before doing any database operation. That you should know as a backend developer. And then we will go for the database query. And if the query succeeds, then we will return the result with success true. If any case there is any error, we will return with success false. So that is the create user. And same way, this is for get all user. This is for getting a single user by ID and updating a user. And this is deleting a user. So here we have the basic operation on group.
Now here, beside the group operation, here we have another two functions. One is login user, another one is forgot password. Why? Because this is a user table and user also involved with login registration. So that's why all the DB operation will be done in service file. And one service file is associated with one database table. So these two functions will be inside this service file, user service. But the root for login will be here. Register, login, forgot password. It's using the same user service, but here we are adding some different root which is not in user root. And if we go to the app.js, then here we can see we are getting user roots here from the user root file and validating it with a token middleware. So here we are passing a middleware and we are importing the auth roots as well from the auth.root file. But here we are not using any middleware. Consider you are creating a login and registration API and those APIs should work without any middleware. But suppose your application have multi-role system where super admin can create user, update user, delete user, and get all users. So all the super admin related APIs can be validated with a token middleware and that is used where. But the login and registration which are belong to the auth roots are without any middleware. So in simple word, user roots are restricted with middleware and auth roots are public roots without any restriction. So in this way, we can apply middleware particular to endpoint, and also here we can see app.use logger middleware which is used in globally. It's not placed inside any root. It's directly placed in the global. So that is the difference between global middleware and root-based middleware.
Now let's test our endpoints. First, we will test user root. I go to the Postman API/users. Why API here? Because it is defined on app.js as the initial of the API endpoint is /API. Actual API URL we have to provide /API. Now clicking on the send button will show token is required. Why? Because it is restricted with token middleware. So before entering to this user roots, it's going to the token middleware which is present inside before request middleware. If I go to the before request middleware, then here we have the token middleware and it takes three parameters. One is request, one is response, and one is next. First, it's trying to get the token from the request headers. If there is no token, directly returning this message, which is showing in the Postman response. Since I don't provide any token in the API request, that's why it's showing this message. Now I'll provide token here. So for that, you have to go to headers and here you have to type token and giving some random value because it's not checking the value. It's just checking the token is present or not. So it's returning now success and data is blank array. Why? Because in our user table, there is no record. All the user roots are token validated. Now I'll test the user root with post request, which will create user. I have added name, email, and password. If you see the database, there is also name, email, and password. ID is the auto increment column. If I go to my service file where we have all the DB operation, they are also in create user. If I expand this, it's also receiving the request and response from the API handler. And then from the request body, it's taking name, email, and password. So all fields are mandatory. The password is missing. It's showing all fields are mandatory. Now I'll send the password again. And remember, I have token in header. Without the token, this endpoint will not work. So here we have the new record created. Change the request to get again, and this time we don't need body, and it's returning one object inside an array. If I go to the auth root, then here also we have register, which is also calling the create user function from the user service. Register. So on clicking the send button, it also showing token is required. As we can see in our code, the token middleware is only at here, not here. But when middleware is checking, it's getting in the URL only /API. So it's attaching the token middleware for all the /API route. To differentiate this, we can separate this with API/private. So our endpoint will change in that case. Server restarted. It will not validate the token user created successfully. And for the user routes, now since it is protected with token middleware, and here also the initial change to API/private. So for users route not found, and this is coming from after request middleware. If we check the after request middleware, here we are sending this response once all the routes are checked and not found. In this API, we have to use /private/users. Now, if I click on the send, token is required. The token is missing. So I'll provide a token and then click on send, then user created successfully. Unfortunately, there is no validation applied before creating the user. So it will create multiple. Click send button. Now I will get 3 user. Now, if I want to get 1 user, I will type ID2 and hit enter. It will return us 1 user. This is the scalable structure. We can scale it more as the application grow. That means the database will grow. That means the modules will grow here. So this is a production level application structure in Express.js. In the next video, I will explain the product module where we have the controller. See you in the next video.